The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back talking vintage sports from the old garden on 49th Street, right in front of Nedick's. Hey, Don Stokes is here. I'll bet. Am I correct? Was that you signing in?
Yes, it was, sir.
Hi, Don.
All right. Don Stokes is becoming a semi-regular here, and welcome back. The topic is right up his alley. Hal Bock is here from the Associated Press.
Hey, Hal.
How you doing, Hal?
Hi, everybody.
Good. And Al Blumkin, the superstar.
Hi, Don.
Hey. We're going to talk the old American Football League, the A.F.L., in particular the Titans, but not exclusively the Titans. And I want to start with Al Blumkin to give us a little history. This started in 1960.
Yeah, okay. Before I start, there's a friend of mine who usually writes baseball books named Bill Rychek. And he wrote a book a number of years ago called The Crash of the Titans, about the Jets franchise, the first 3 years under Harry Wismer, which is really, really funny and really excellent.
Tell us a little bit about it.
Okay, basically, when the A.F.L. was formed in 1960, the New York franchise was awarded to a sportscaster by the name of Harry Wismer, who was very underfinanced. And
he was a promoter, am I correct?
Yeah, he was a promoter, sports writer and promoter. And they played the first 4 years. The first year that they were known as the Jets, 1963, at the dilapidated Polo Grounds. They were the first tenants after the Giants had left the baseball Giants left in 1957. The Mets didn't come in, obviously, until 1962. And they hired Sammy Baugh as their first coach. They
were the Titans originally.
Titans, exactly.
David Hubler.
Yes, hi, good evening.
The book was The Crash of the Titans. And they had a lot of, NFL players that washed out of the NFL. Practically the first couple of years, the only decent players they had were Larry Grantham, who was a draft choice, and Don Mayard, who had been cut from the Giants by the brilliant Allie Sherman because he didn't like Mayard's long hair. And they played 3 years in the as the Titans under Wismer in the Polo Grounds, and they were known mostly for falsifying their attendance. And Dick Young, the writer on the Daily News, once described one of their games as 20,000 fans came disguised as empty seats, which is a line that's been used
beautifully. Marty Rose, who's a podcaster on this network, and I were at the Polo Grounds in those days. In particular, I could remember the Dallas Texans.
Yeah, they became the Kansas City Chiefs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we sat there, as Marty says, with 200 of our closest friends.
Yeah, my father who worked for Bear Stearns in those days, one of the partners had an interest in the Titans. And my father would come home with like 10 tickets for the Titans game. Nobody went to. Did you want to go? No. Okay. And just chuck them. But
we got our tickets from Murray Rose, who was an associate of Hal Bock's at the Associated Press.
One time I had a conversation with Jim Turner, the old place kicker, and he said to me, I asked him to describe the Polo Grounds, and he said there were more pigeons than people. Pretty good.
I'll tell you, it was cold out there. I can remember we were too young to drink coffee. We were kids, and we were up there with the hot chocolate or the cocoa, whatever it was. It was freezing cold, and there were not many people at all. But it was an exciting brand of football in the sense that it was wide open and much appreciated by those who were there. How did the Titans crash, Al Blumkin?
Basically, Wismer, by the third year, he had basically gone bankrupt. Okay, and the players had to run to the wherever, when the checks were issued to make sure that they were good.
Right.
And everything that went on with the team that was not making any sort of money and had those kind of conditions went on with them.
Okay.
The late great Bill Shannon, who was a great baseball scorer, worked for the Titans in those early days, and he would tell stories about how Wismer would lay out tickets in his bedroom on the bed and dole out tickets from that location. So it was really fly by the seat of your pants.
Right.
Yeah, also, the Giants were in their heyday during those years.
Yeah, that's true.
By the time they became the Jets and got into Shea Stadium, the Giants were on were on a downward trend, which culminated in a one victory season in 1966. And a lot of people went to the Jet games when they moved to Shea Stadium because they couldn't get tickets to Giant games.
Right. And they had some early following. I remember Wahoo
McDaniel, yeah.
The McDaniel.
McDaniel. Yeah, the linebacker.
Yeah, absolutely. And the public address announcer would say, tackle made by guess who?
Wahoo.
Brad would go, Wahoo.
Right. That's right.
It was entertaining. And I want to know, Don Stokes, were you there? Were you old enough to have been there in those early years? Because you've got a Facebook page it's called Freezing at Flushing, and it's about those Jets, and I want to know when you picked them up.
Well, I don't recall going to a Polo Grounds game for the Jets. I do remember going to a Met game, surprisingly. I think I was like 3 years old, and I don't know why I remember that, but I remember going to a New York Mets game at the Polo Grounds. But as far as the Jets are concerned, or Titans, if you want to say that, my memories of them come basically from Shea Stadium. I read a lot about the Polo Ground years and how dilapidated, as someone said earlier, the stadium was, and the fact that also that the Jets, or the Titans as they were called back then, got really a bad deal signing with the Polo Grounds because of the fact that they had to agree to not play football until the Mets season was over in the Polo Grounds because Harry Wismer signed a deal and it carried over into Shea Stadium, and the same thing happened to them in Shea Stadium. They had to agree not to play any football games until the season was over, and also they could not take part of any of the parking facilities as far as charging. That went directly to the Mets also. So they had a very bad deal in both instances, and it kind of pushed the Jets out of Shea Stadium, as we all know, years later, by Mr. Hess doing what he did. But as I said, my memories come more from the Shea Stadium A.F.L. years when they were breaking records as far as attendance was concerned at Shea Stadium, and it was an exciting time.
It was indeed. But
Hal Bock, did you know a football writer named Larry Feltzer at all?
Sure.
Yeah, I just finished a book of his that came out several years ago on the merger of the A.F.L. and the NFL, which was very, very fascinating stuff in there.
I'd love for you to talk to that.
Yeah.
That made all the difference in football in those days. And I'll just say that Al Davis was the commissioner of the A.F.L. when the merger went down.
Well, the signing that triggered that was Pete Gogolak when the Giants signed him away from the Buffalo Bills, and then the A.F.L. made Davis the commissioner, and he had several NFL stars to sign future contracts, and then when the merger was announced, they all reverted to whatever team they were on.
May we just go back a second to when Wismer went down the tubes? How did a transfer of ownership take place?
No,
Hal could probably answer that better than I could.
Well, Sonny Werblin was a showman, and he recognized that there was room in New York for more than one football franchise. Football was becoming a very popular sport. Don't forget, we had the game of the ages in 1958, the overtime game between the Giants and the Bills, and that game really lit a fire for the National Football League. People became aware.
Giants and the Colts.
Yeah.
Giants and the Colts, yeah. What did I say that?
Bills.
You said the Bills. I was wondering which game you were talking.
No, Giants and the Colts.
Sure, that was a great game.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and people discovered the NFL. And Werblin, who was a showman, he was a smart cookie. He recognized that there might be a market for another league, another team, and another league. And there were the Jets waiting to be rescued, or the Titans waiting to be rescued. And Sonny swooped in with some other investors, and he bought the team, not for a lot of money. He bought the team on a shoestring, but he invested money in the players. And the first player that he invested big money in was Joe Willie Namath, the quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
And Namath was a lightning rod, and the Werblin was so smart. He signed Namath after the Sugar Bowl game under the goalposts. Now, what's a better story than that? For $425,000. $425,000 in the 60s was a ton of money. So they immediately got credibility. They had a star, and he knew that New York was a star town, and that's why he went after Joe Namath. Namath had an opportunity to sign, I think, with the Cardinals.
Yeah.
Was the NFL team that drafted him. And Namath hooked on with the Jets, and the rest is history.
May I say something about that Joe Namath signing?
Sure.
Okay, well, basically what that was, actually the Houston Oilers had the draft rights to Joe Namath because they had the number one pick in 1965. But they knew they couldn't sign Joe Namath. They couldn't afford him. And they weren't going to get into a bidding war with the NFL. So they made a deal with the Jets. And I don't know what transpired, but the Jets obviously got the draft pick. And, of course, the Cardinals got into the bidding war with the New York Jets. And then eventually when the Jets did acquire Joe Namath, it was actually the Giants who had acquired the draft rights from the Cardinals. They were going to sign Namath, but it was too late by now.
Oh, that's interesting. I imagine how history would have changed with that.
But the Giants were becoming a disaster when Namath came out of college.
Exactly.
Who knows whether he would have wanted to play there. I mean, the team was old, and they just really fell apart completely after 1963.
But don't forget, as Hal mentioned those the great game with the Colts. There were a couple of other games that was sort of, I would say, that turned the whole aspect of following the NFL. And those were a couple of those Giants-Browns games. There was one year I think the Giants had to win like 2 games in a row.
That was the same year, 1958.
Yeah, against Cleveland.
Summerall kicked a 49-yard field goal in the snow.
Well, yeah, that was Pat Summerall.
Yeah, and then they said,
and he was only called Pat because it was point after touchdown.
Yeah,
and then he became a tremendous announcer for many, many years.
And then after that, they had tied for the division. They put the Giants. And they had a playoff game the next week where they beat the Browns 10-0, and Jimmy Brown was held to
they beat Cleveland again, right?
And that set up the Colts and Giants. And I had listened to all those on the radio, because the local blackout was in effect back then.
Well, you know what we used to do with the blackout?
I was 15 years old.
Yeah, we were able to go. drive up from New York into Connecticut. Connecticut was there was a boundary line somewhere around Stamford or maybe a little further north. That once you got past there, you could catch the Giants games on TV even with the blackout. And I remember you'd drive up there and you'd see motels along the highway there that would say Giants on TV here. And you could go in and you'd rent a room for a couple of hours. I remember we did it one time, friends of mine and I, and the TV in our room didn't work. So the owner of the motel took us into the next room where this one poor guy, he might have been a traveling salesman, was sitting there watching the game, and he said, "You don't mind if these guys watch the game with you, do you?" So we all sat there and watched the game, but we did that all week after week. And to attract people, in addition to the announcements on the side, some of these motels actually staged halftime shows where you would throw footballs through a tire that was moving. A couple of them actually brought like the high school band into the parking lot. I mean, it was big business because they could capitalize on renting the room twice in one day, and that's how we got to see a lot of games that folks in New York could not see.
Yeah, the only time I was able to do that was you came home from college in 1962. A few of us drove down to Philadelphia where one of our friends lived and watched that giant Green Bay game that was, that 16-7 game that was played in the wind tunnel, the 1962 championship game. But in 1958, I was too young to be able to do that, so I settled for the radio.
We used to go to Philadelphia to watch Willie come back with the Giants, and that was a big event for the kids in my neighborhood.
And then, talking about the Namath signing, Werblin not only signed Namath, but he doubled down, and he signed John Hewitt, the Notre Dame quarterback who won the Heisman Trophy. So now he had two high-level quarterbacks for the Jets, and there was a quarterback, not a controversy, but a competition in training camp. And there was a period there where, and Don can speak to this probably better than I, there was a period there that it looked like Hewitt was going to be the Jets quarterback, not Joe Willie Namath. Until
right, and they had another guy, Talifero or Talifero.
Yes, Mike Tolliver. Mike Tolliver.
He was a good throwing quarterback, and he was in the mix. And they were going to groom Namath a little bit, but he just took the handle and went with it.
That was Werblin. Yeah, he pushed for Namath to play.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we back didn't feel that Namath was ready to play in the regular season, and it was Sonny Werblin that pushed for that because he knew he had a star in his hands, and also the reason why they drafted 4 quarterbacks they had. And the reason why they did that is because Namath's knees were so bad, and the doctor who had took a look at Namath's knees had said that if he had known his knees were so bad, he would have recommended not even to draft him.
Whoa! Didn't realize they were that bad.
And Namath did get a lot of flack for not being able to serve in the military because of the knees. The same way Mickey Mantle had gotten it a decade earlier with the Yankees.
Okay. I've got to ask you guys, there was a publication that the A.F.L. put out, and it was all the yearbooks in one. It was the A.F.L. yearbook. Did any of you guys remember buying that or having it?
Oh, I have all the guides that the Sporting News put out of the A.F.L.
Oh, okay. Well, this is the first year, and it had all the rosters and Abner Haynes, and they had some glitz and glitter, to say nothing of Billy Cannon, who was out of LSU, and it was just fun. Let's just put it that way. NFL was getting really serious, and you could understand it. A lot of it had to do with the betting, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, basically, because I was in Pittsburgh in college during the first 4 years of that, and I started watching the games in 1961, for two reasons. One, because the Steelers were on, when the Steelers were on at home, the games were blacked out, and they weren't very good anyway. And in 1961, they started taking action on the A.F.L. games. That's when you know that the league was going. I know the league was going to make it.
Well, yeah, that and that big TV contract.
Leagues,
yeah.
Difference between the two leagues, that the NFL was kind of button-down football, old-fashioned, 3 yards and a cloud of dust football. The A.F.L., they just ran all over the place. They threw passes all over the place. It was wide open and a much more exciting brand of football. And I think that's what made the game so popular and the league so popular.
Yeah, they did what the ABL did, in effect. The ABL got a two-tone basketball. Didn't they start with a three-point shot? Yeah. And that brought in the fans. It was different.
Yeah, they also had some rogue players in the ABL.
ABA, yeah.
Guys that might have been a little tainted by one of the scandals. I know Doug Moe was one of those guys.
Yeah,
Larry Brown.
Yeah, Larry Brown.
Roger Brown was the star for the Pacers, and Connie Hawkins for the Pittsburgh whatevers at the back then. Yeah.
Pipers.
Yeah.
Hal, did you get to interview Larry Brown much? He was reputed to be a genius, wasn't he?
Well, in his own mind, without question. No, I didn't do much of that. No, I didn't do much pro basketball in those days. I was wrapped up with hockey and baseball. But
I almost got into a fight with Larry Brown, believe it or not.
I believe it. Tell us the details.
He was a hothead. I was working as a camp counselor in Pennsylvania, in an area that had a lot of really good camps that brought in a lot of college-level ball players for the summer. And we had a team, as did every other camp in the area, had a counselor's team, and we were terrible. I mean, we weren't good at all. We had one guy who was playing varsity for William and Mary, and he was like our coach and leader and everything. And we were coming up to play Larry Brown. Larry Brown was a long-time counselor at a camp called Camp Kiyuma. And they ran through the league year after year. The year that we played them, that I was on the team, they had three starters from North Carolina playing on the team. And our coach and only varsity player said, look, what we'll do is we just won't shoot. They're going to beat us, but we'll try to keep the score presentable. So we did this sort of four corners offense. We just kept passing the ball around. And they beat us something like 14-9, believe it or not. And for some reason, Brown got really hot under the collar, and he came charging at me. I had nothing to do with it. He should have picked out someone his own size, because he was a bit... But I remember, when he was playing, he was the guy who decked Art Heyman from Duke. They had a fight, and Brown had slugged Art Heyman, who was a big, strong guy. If you remember Heyman, he played for the Knicks for a couple of seasons. And I said, oh, my God, this guy decked Art Heyman. He's coming after me. And I just took off. I wasn't about the deal. And that was my one fight almost fight with Larry Brown.
Was that up in the Poconos, David?
It was in Wayne County, Pennsylvania, right near the Delaware Water Gap.
Oh, okay.
And
I went to a camp up there called Kittatinny.
Oh,
and anyway, we had same thing. Counselors would play other camps, and the kids of all levels would play other camps. And
right, exactly. Our camp owner had been basketball coach at Wequahic High School in the Newark area. And he had a couple of, I can't think of the guy. He played a good number of years in the NBA. I can't think of his name right now. He came up every year. He didn't come up in time to play in that game, unfortunately. But, it was a pretty competitive league. And this Kiyuma group just, they were like the old Yankees. They just went through the whole league and beat everybody.
Did the three of you guys have camp experiences as well? Hal, Al,
Yeah.
and Don?
Yeah.
Where'd you go to camp?
Camp Kindering in Hopewell Junction, New York. Went for 4 summers.
Oh, my
I think
grandson went there.
Yeah, I think my wife went there.
No, because my father was a traveling salesman, and a few of the years my mother went with him for the summer, so they dumped me and my brother in Camp Kindering for the 2 months.
It sounds like you didn't like it.
No, I was.
Dumped.
It was not. It was very heavily, Jewish and a lot of religious stuff, which I didn't care for, and I just, let's put it this way, it was basically not a good memory.
Mm.
Okay.
Well, my grandson went there for 4 years, and he had a great time. I, on the other hand, was working during the summer. I didn't have time to go to camp.
I went from the time I was 11 through the time I was 14.
Don, how about you? Did you go to camp in the summer?
Yeah, that was basically the same time period I went when I was like 11 to 14. I went to a camp called Camp Kawago, and I believe that's somewhere in Central Valley, New York, and it was like during the 70s, so it was a little odd being there. There was a lot of folk music going on, and people were smoking things they shouldn't have been smoking, but it was a good experience.
Should have been saving it for me. They shouldn't be smoking all that stuff.
The next camp I went to was Camp Drum.
Right, me too.
Courtesy of the United States Army Reserve.
Right. I'll tell you, my father, rest his soul, lost a lot of his family in the concentration camp. And he came over here, and he didn't know from camps, summer camps, and my mother told him, we're going to send Ralph to camp. And he just, the look, my mother says, it just came over him. I mean, he was first generation over here, and she was second generation, so she basically trained him in the ways of stuff. But you're going to send him to the camps. He could not understand that. But yeah, and
that must be chilling for him. Yeah.
I went from a very young age. I was like 7, and stayed there till I was maybe 8, 9 years at the same camp. And you develop lifelong friends, and it's wonderful. I loved getting away the 8 weeks during the summer. That New York was oppressive, heat-wise, and just to get out of the city was pretty cool. So that was nice. But I want to talk about that first year. We digressed a little bit when the Titans folded and they were taken over. How did that run smoothly?
They were still in the Polo Grounds for the first year.
Okay.
They took over. The Werblin and Company took over in 1963, and it's still in the Polo Grounds. The Giants, across the river, were going to the third straight NFL championship game that season. They didn't really draw anything, but what happened when they moved to spanking new Shea Stadium in 1964, which of course was the first year that that stadium was open, and I went to a couple of games there in 1964 because tickets were fairly easy to get, and they had a quarterback named Dick Wood.
Yes.
Who was a journeyman, but they were fairly competitive, and basically, as I said before, people who couldn't get tickets to the Giants because they were being inherited, and the waiting list was 10 miles long, said, well, if we can't get in there, we'll come to Shea Stadium and watch them.
Plus, they had all of Long Island.
All of Long Island. And when they came in, Nedick came in 1965, all of a sudden, coupled with the Giants' decline, it became a very hot ticket.
I think they trained at Hofstra, if I'm not mistaken.
They're very Long Island oriented in those years.
I want to call attention to something. The New York franchise had their first two owners, as Hal said, running things by shoestrings, by the seat of their pants. The Texas owners, some of the richest people in the United States of America, owned football teams in Texas.
Well, H.L. Hunt, Lamar Hunt, who was the son of H.L. Hunt, owned the Dallas Texans, the big Kansas City Chiefs, and Bud Adams, an oil magnate, owned the Houston Oilers, and they had tried to get in to the NFL as expansion teams, and the NFL, led by George Halas, refused to grant them expansion teams. The NFL expanded into Dallas with the Cowboys in 1960 because the A.F.L. had put a team in there.
That set off the draft wars.
Oh yeah.
They would both have drafts. Both leagues would have drafts. They'd both draft the same players, and then it became a bidding war. And there are some fabulous stories about hiding players out and just surreptitious stuff that each league did to the other league. I know I covered an A.F.L. draft. They drafted in the first round, and it took them like 14 hours because they wanted to make sure that the players they drafted were available, and it was a circus. It really was in those days.
Yeah, signability.
Yep.
Yeah, but there was a gentleman's agreement to respect the other league's contracts until Gogolak play out his option with Buffalo and jump to the Giants. That set the whole series of events that led to the merger. Because, as I said before, Al Davis was named commissioner, and he had Mike Ditka and Roman Gabriel, among others, all prepared to jump to the A.F.L.
Was Gogolak the first sidewinding kicker?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, he was.
He had a brother too, didn't he? Who played?
Charlie was a first draft choice a few years later by the Redskins. Yeah, and he was not nearly as good as Pete was.
He played for Princeton, didn't he?
No, Charlie played for Princeton. Pete played for Cornell, I think.
Your memories are incredible.
I just read this stuff. I just read a book on this stuff over the last few days.
Oh, you've been cheating on us. You've been cheating.
Yeah.
Cribbing for the exam.
No, I started this before I know what the topic
was. This was literally an open book exam.
Yeah,
right.
It's just a remarkable coincidence.
Good. I'm glad we put that together, Al.
Yeah, and the dog ate the homework. I know.
And the cat ate the dog, which
right.
The goat ate the money, like in a MASH episode.
The Toledo Mud Hen. Whenever I think of MASH and I think of baseball, I think of the Toledo Mud Hens. Wow, that was a great show.
Yeah.
I remember one of the shows they were betting on the 51 World Series.
On the pennant race.
Oh, was
I
that
just saw that episode the other day. I watched them. They relaxed. I've seen them, most of them, too many times to count. And, Klinger predicts that the Dodgers are going to win the pennant, and Winchester, who knows nothing about baseball, makes all sorts of investments in giving 5-1 and 6-1. And the rest of the camp has the Giants, and they play the broadcast.
Really in the morning or late at night.
Yeah, and Winchester is outside of the OR, and he has a Dodger cap on, and then when Thompson hits the home run, he goes into a Jackie Gleason swoon. Yeah, it's a very, very funny episode. Yeah.
Good show. And a good show tonight, gentlemen. I'm very appreciative of your company.
Yeah, we didn't talk about the USFL. Well, maybe they'll say that for
Oh, God, Trump is in that. But I don't discuss Trump. Trump was in that league.
Mentioning the name is kind of...
that
he's still the president, ladies and
God.
gentlemen. Doesn't that surprise you when you get up in the morning?
It
He's
sickens
still
me.
the president.
It sickens me.
It surprises me that we're not at war when I get up in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't put the two words together.
Yeah.
What,
President
Trump?
and Trump, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm on a couple of football sites on Facebook, and when you see anything remotely related to the WFL or the USFL, I just ignore them.
Yeah.
Well, this is all the NFL's fault. If they have given Donald Trump his franchise in Buffalo, he would be the owner of the Bills right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. He's right.
That's right.
Or maybe not. The Bills might have gone
By the
under.
same token, Bush's kid, the last Bush, whatever his name is, was going to own the Texas Rangers, or maybe did own them.
Well, he did. He did for a while.
He did own them.
Yeah.
Yeah. W. He owned, yeah.
I'll tell you this. I keep saying this to my wife. This president that we now have makes W look like Abraham Lincoln.
Exactly.
Oh yeah,
Exactly.
true. Or Mensa candidate.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
He's mean. It's not just that he's stupid or his ideology.
He's cruel.
He's cruel. He's vindictive. Yeah.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, he's vindictive, and that's to the point where his constituents elected him after he held up his arm like mimicking the handicapped guy.
Yes. Oh yeah, yeah.
One thing about a person is
he's groping women. They've got tapes. They have him on tapes. There's a 13-year-old had a lawsuit against him when he's running for president, and he still gets elected. Who's voting?
He also cannot laugh at himself. He has absolutely no sense of humor.
No. Well, you talk about who won, and Sarah Huckabee says the same thing. But don't forget, Clinton got 3 million votes more than he did. He won it very cleverly because Clinton's campaign was very poor.
She was a terrible candidate.
She was a terrible candidate.
He writes his book and makes $1 billion, blaming everybody else for herself.
But a lot of the problem was her because she didn't campaign in the 3 states that turned it over to him.
You're right.
And that was it. But he still came up 3 million votes short on the popular vote.
The problem was they fixed the primaries and Bernie got screwed out of the nomination.
Yeah, that happens too. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's one of those worlds, and we're living in it. So let's hope we're all here next week. How about that?
Yes, right.
That's right.
And we have to hold up our green cards or something. Make sure we're not deported in the middle of the night.
Right. Yes. Absolutely. All right, gentlemen. Thank you very much. I'm not excluding anybody's last thoughts. Anybody have anything to say that they've been hanging on to before we close it out? Guess not.
No.
All right. I'm Ralph Tyko, Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. David Hubler, Alan Blumkin, Hal Bock, and Don Stokes. If you out there enjoyed our offering in any way, please box up some lightly used children's books and take them to the Head Start program in whatever city or township you live. Anywhere there's a Head Start program, get kids reading, get kids ready for school. It'd be great, and I'd appreciate it. Everybody have a nice week. We'll be back. Same, Al, you say it.
Same bad time, same bad channel.
Good. Love hearing you, Al. Be back then, everybody. Adios.
Okay.
Adios.
Bye-bye.
Hanukkah.
Good night.